when you moved to LA, it took you a while to really break through, right? I mean, you were 36 when you were cast in Mad Men, and you were working before then, but it was spotty, right? What characterized that period of time?
I moved out to LA when I was 25. So my kind of guiding principle was, look, I don't want to be that guy who's waiting tables, losing hair, 40 years old, 3 credits on his resume, still calls himself an actor, and is just trying to hold it together.
Yeah.
So I gave myself 5 years. I was like, a lot can happen in 5 years. And that's a pretty fair amount of time to really kind of give yourself a chance to figure out the city, figure out how it all works, what's it going to be, and really kind of give yourself a fair shot. And let's not kid ourselves. Like, acting is, especially now, less so, a little bit less so then, but especially now, is a young person's game, basically. Fortunately enough, I happened to turn 30 on the set of my first film that I ever did. It was called We Were Soldiers. And I kind of looked up and was like, okay, I had done a couple TV things, I had done this film, and then literally after that, the fall after that, I got my first regular part on a series, a show called The Division, which I'm sure you all watched. There's going to be a quiz that was on the Lifetime television network. About 5 lady cops and me. Everybody starts somewhere.
Right.
And it took me 3 solid years of auditioning and failing. I didn't get a single thing. I didn't get a single acting job, and I auditioned for 200 in the first 3 years of my career. 3 years. I was always able to kind of see myself from a third-person perspective and say, like, well, this is part of it too. This is part of life too. Right. And I guess I must have learned that lesson fairly young.
Well, when Mad Men hit, when you were 35, it created a frenzy. And there are all kinds of explanations aside from just the goodness and quality of the show about what that, why it created that kind of stir. What's your theory?
First of all, there was really nothing like our show. I mean, it had its elements of things that I think people could recognize, but it was always HBO and Showtime. They were doing their prestige television, but then in 2005 or whatever, the other networks started to do cool shows and promote them as cool shows, and they were cool shows, and they got important movie stars to be in them, and ours was different. It was a show that had buzz and a show that was intelligent, and it didn't talk down to its audience, and it was cryptic, and it was weird, and it was slow, and it was all these different things that people kind of didn't really know what to do with it, but they knew it was different, and people talked about it, and it had this outsized kind of cultural footprint that, the show sort of won awards and things out of the gate, so we knew we were a hit, but there was always but no one watches it. And then we were like, somebody is watching it.
I think people were watching it. Yeah.
and then the second season, when the first season, our advertisers were like boner pills and that headache medicine that you put directly on your forehead. And season 2, it was Mercedes-Benz and Heineken. So we were like, somebody's watching, and they're really rich. So that's kind of when we realized, like, oh wow, like this is happening.
Mad Men was just such a career-defining role. I wonder if your whole acting life post-Mad Men is sort of a reaction against Mad Men.
For me, the fun of being an actor is getting to do different things. And while there is something very exciting and cool to be able to do one role for what turned out to be the better part of a decade, the fun thing for an actor is to be able to do different stuff. And so it wasn't necessarily that I wanted to react against and play the opposite, but I definitely wanted to just do different things. And so when, for example, Tina Fey decides, okay, hey, you want to be on 30 Rock? That's different. Yeah, I'd like to do that. That's kind of fun. It's also, for me, the fun part of doing what I do is doing things that are a little bit risky, make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. And I've certainly been guilty of doing a lot of those things. So,
well, one of the great things about the combination of an indelible character like Don Draper and your comic skills is that you've done a lot of wonderful kind of what you could call comic send-ups in a way of the Don Draper type. I'm thinking of your role in Bridesmaids. Was this before or after you and Kristen Wiig did a lot of great stuff together on Saturday Night Live?
It was after. Kristen and I knew each other fairly well by this point, and she had come to me and said, Annie and I wrote this great movie, and we're really excited. We really want you to be in it. And I was like, cool. I was like, well, you know, I'm kind of doing this show. I don't have a ton of time. And she's like, oh, but we wrote a part for you. We wrote a part for you. And I was like, I read it, and I was like, the first 3 pages are like, we're just like, it's a big sex scene. I was like, Kristen. And then, of course, because I was shooting Mad Men, I like had to shoot my scenes on the weekend. So everything was pushed to the very end of their schedule. So we're bouncing around and doing all this crazy stuff, and the crew is like bored and done and ready to leave, and it's the last day of shooting, last 2 days of shooting, and they're just like, who is this idiot that hasn't been here this entire time, wasting our time in some sex scene that's going to get cut? But it didn't, and it was fun, and she's a dream and wrote a very funny thing that was awesome.
Well, it's really good stuff. And we're starting with all the comedy because we're living in such dark times, okay? We have another handsome heel character, a character who, like Don Draper, is powerful, manipulative, and loves treating women as objects to be controlled. And, of course, I'm talking about the Reverend Richard Wayne Gary Wayne from The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
There's a couple interesting things about that show. One, the star of the show used to be my student. We can start with that. I used to teach high school, and in 1995, there was a 15-year-old ninth grader with, looked like the Wendy's girl, like red hair, pigtails, this tall, and was one of the best kids in class, and she grew up to become Ellie Kemper and the star of that. So I was so pleased that she got her own show. And then Tina and Robert came to me and were like, we want you to play the guy. He's a super important part. It doesn't shoot that much. Okay, what's the deal? He's the guy, let me finish, who keeps women in a bunker underground. Let me finish. It's funny. It's not a weird sex thing. And I was like, and I just basically leaned back on my number one rule regarding comedy, which is basically just do anything Tina Fey says.
That's smart. Thank you all for coming, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Putting on the suit and
it's so late.
And everything else.